All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Donovan Pasel. I'm the owner of Embark. Tonight, we're going to be talking about trekking in Bhutan. We're going to talk about one of my favorite countries in the Himalayas, second only to Nepal. And I will go over a little bit about the country, what to expect on a hike in this area. So my background is I've been planning expeditions, treks, and mountain climbs for more than 20 years, including Nepal, Tanzania, Peru, Guatemala, Bhutan, and many, many more. We've been running adventure treks all over the world and have some new and exciting things coming up next year, including a trek in Pakistan, as well as an island trek off the coast of Portugal. So lots of different treks around the world. Always make sure to check our website for new things each year. So my email address is Donovan at embarkexplorationco.com. All right, Bhutan. Bhutan, the literal translation is the land of thunder dragon. That's what Bhutan means in Bhutanese. And what's magical about this area is everything that it kind of has with the environment. I always like to show the first kind of classic pictures of each location to give everyone an understanding of what to kind of expect. This is the most famous picture in Bhutan. And if you look closely on this little trail right here, you'll see people walking up these steps. This is the most iconic picture. What everybody comes to see, this is called the Tiger's Nest. We will come back to that in a moment. This is another image of what you'd expect in Bhutan. Bhutan is beautiful. It is green, it is lush, it is full of rivers. Those rivers actually provide hydroelectricity to India. So they're lucky to be up in the Himalayas above a country that, like India, needs water. You have the classic monasteries and the green and the blue skies. This is what you think of when you think of Bhutan. I always also like to jump back to this picture. This was me a few decades ago. I took this picture in Bhutan, crossing one of the high passes there with two of our Bhutanese guides at the time. So the classic set of mountains. What's interesting about Bhutan is the mountains are kind of the border between Bhutan and China. All right, so a little bit about Embark. We've been organizing treks in Bhutan and Nepal for about 20 years now. I've spent a lot of time in both countries and absolutely love each one and what they have to offer. They're completely different. On average, we have about 50 to 100 people per year in the Himalayas. We've got 3 groups here in the next few weeks that are going to be over there hiking on various treks. And we prefer to organize treks that are part of an adventure hike, but part cultural. Bhutan is completely different from lots of the world. People still wear a lot of the traditional dress, and it feels like a kind of a step back in time. So you must see the cultural piece of it in addition to going on a hike. All trips are organized in conjunction with local guides per government regulations. So the government of Bhutan is a very controlling part of your experience with permits and organization and approvals in order to do this. But this is what they call a high value and low impact tourism. High value meaning you have to pay a lot per day to be in the country, and low impact means less people come so they get a better experience. So this is what Bhutan is known for. Nepal, its neighbor, is actually kind of the opposite. There's also a low value and a high impact on tourism. So they're both kind of opposite of each other in ways. So this is what it looks like hiking in the lowlands of Bhutan. This was a recent group of ours, and you can see 2 Bhutanese men here with their trekking boots on. And these are our guides, and these are the guides that take us on your treks. And again, what's the magic of Bhutan is, again, it feels like it's a different world, and it really, really is. So a little bit about Bhutan. It was once one of the most isolated countries, known for gross national happiness. Didn't open up into the outside until the 70s. Didn't really get tourism going until about 20 years ago. High cost, not a lot of people go there. Whereas in Nepal, you might have a few million people per year. In Bhutan, you have a few 100,000, which is dramatic. It's known for its spectacular mountains, ancient monasteries all dotted throughout the countryside, rich flora and fauna, big green trees everywhere, and Buddhist culture, which is a part of life. So right now there's a high cost per day that's called the Sustainable Development Fee. It was $200 per day for the longest time. I think post COVID, they lowered it down to $100 per day per person to physically be inside the country. That's that high cost, low impact tourism that I was talking about today. That's the permit. So the visas and permits and flights are all organized in advance through kind of a series of third parties to be able to visit Bhutan. And unlike Nepal, most of the trekking is sleeping outside, not in tea houses like in Nepal. So in Bhutan, you're out on a hike, you are definitely sleeping outside, not inside like in Nepal. So here's Bhutan, and tonight we're going to kind of talk about this western region right here, because this is where most of it happens. Couple plates of note. Paro, this is where you fly into. Thimphu, this is the capital city. Ha Valley, very cultural area to see lots of locals and the daily life of locals. Punakha, former capital, administrative capital, very, it's kind of like going to Washington, D.C., I guess. And then this mountain range, or this range, this national park right here, and a lot of the trails dot through this. So as you can see, of China in the north, you have all these 7,000-meter peaks that are kind of on the border. And so a lot of the trekking goes up at the base of these peaks and around these peaks. So India below, as I said, India receives all of Bhutan's water, and I believe that's their number one source of revenue is hydroelectricity to India. All right, so the things you want to know about Bhutan. Best time of year, late September to late November. This is like anywhere in the Himalayas, or March through early May. This is just like Nepal as well. This is the spring and the autumn. This is the best time to visit there. Can you go later in the year? Yes, you can go. Would you want to come in the rainy season, July and August? No, but the best time of year is this. The flights come via Nepal, India, Bangkok, and even Bangladesh. Now, what's interesting about that is the flights are organized through a national carrier called Druk Air, and those flights are expensive. So, for example, if you're coming from Bangkok, which you can fly over Southeast Asia for a lot of places for very affordable. Coming from Bangkok, it's $900 to $1,000. You can almost get to Thailand for $1,000 from the United States, but this short 5-hour flight is expensive because there's no competition. Anyway, so just take that into consideration if you're thinking about going into Bhutan at some point. All right, so I love this picture right here. So this is the airport, and this is where you fly into. So you fly into this gorgeous valley. It's full of green. The plane comes down and turns around these kind of like green rolling hills. Everything's lush. There's rivers, there's monasteries, and you're not in a big city. You're out in a town, basically, like that. And so this is Paro, and this is where a lot of important things happen. This is where the tiger's nest is, which you'll see in a moment here. This is where a number of treks begin, and another of kind of historical sites. So the cool thing about Paro is you can wander around, you can see typical Buddhist monasteries, poke your head into some of the schools, walk around. But what's also cool is the archery. So in the United States, whereas you might see on the weekend a basketball or baseball games or things like there, archery is happening all over Bhutan. Bhutanese in the Olympics are archers, and they're some of the best, and they're using compound bows. So it's fun to be able to stop and watch a bunch of men shoot bow and arrow in a local park as well. So it's kind of the culture that kind of comes into it. And then another part of the culture is obviously, the prayer wheels, which you'll see right here. Everyone's walking around these. Sometimes a lot of the older people will just go around in circles from this all day and just circle around and come back, or even sit in a chair and just spend one all day. So there's a magical side to the culture in Bhutan that you get to see, and it kind of permeates everywhere that you go. All right, the treks in Bhutan. If you're thinking about doing a trek in Bhutan, here are some of them. There are many, but these are some of the top treks. The Chomolhari Trek is perhaps the most popular. There's a few variations on it. You also see it spelled, the trail is Chomolhari with a C as well. This is around an 8-day trek, depending upon how you do it, 40 to 50 miles. There's a loop, there's a full circuit. That is the number one trek. Goes up along the Chinese border. The Druk Path, shorter, more moderate trek, very popular as well. 5 days, around 30 to 35 miles. The Snowman Trek, which a lot of people have heard about, no one's going to do here on this one. But the Snowman Trek, if you read like Outside Magazine, other things, this is one of the hardest treks in the world. Everybody wants to do it. If you want to be somebody cool in the trekking world, it's a 32-day trek. The newest thing out is a Trans-Bhutan Trail. It runs west to east, east to west across the country. It's 250 miles in total, but people do portions of it. So Embark does a portion of it. There's different parts of it, and it's more like village to village trekking that you'd see more like in Nepal. And then there's the Tiger's Nest Trek, the 5 hours, 4 miles. We'll look at that here in just a moment. It's what everyone does and worth it. So the things about the treks is you're usually crossing high passes. You're not peaking out. So the Chomolhari Pass is over 15,000 feet. Mountaineering is prohibited. You cannot go to the top of mountains. The Bhutanese have saved the tops of those mountains for their gods. Um, and you're always camping on these treks. There are some monasteries that you can stay in on some basic treks, but mostly you're camping. I absolutely love this map right here. And again, you can kind of see the monasteries kind of spread out through the major cities. You can see what the traditional dress is in some of these areas. These ones up north have these really cool kind of hats. As you can see, as I mentioned earlier, Paro is where you kind of come into. And if you look closer, you can kind of see some of the treks right here. Here's the start of the Chomolhari Trek that kind of comes up this way and back down like here. Here's the Druk Path Trek right in here as well. And you can also see the Snowman Trek, which kind of comes up here along the border of China. So very, very cool map that kind of shows all of what you would expect to see in Bhutan. So let's look at some of the trekking. This to me almost looks like where I'm at right now, Oregon. It's really green and lush. And some of that Trans-Bhutan Trail is just like that. Here was a group earlier this year. You're walking through, you know, you're walking on normal trails. You're going to see some come into different kind of villages. You're going to sleep near the villages, but still camping wise. And you're just going to hike each day, very set amount of time. This right here is the suspension bridges. I love suspension bridges and all around the world. But this is the start to the Chomolhari Trek on your, if you end up doing kind of the coolest or the easiest one that's here to do. And if you look at this map, this is that kind of starting point. And what this does is it kind of shows you, as I showed you on the other map, kind of what your each day where you're going to as you make your way up to the base camp. You have a pass that's right here, 4,700 meters. Then you have another pass at 4,900 meters. So, way over 15,000 feet. But these are what the treks look like. It's kind of coming down like this. And then you can also see the Druk Path Trail, which is right here with the blue, coming across a much shorter, lower elevation trek. But this is the Chomolhari Trek, the most popular trek in there, the most amount of people. But again, this is not like trekking to Everest Base Camp. There's many less people in this part of the world. Here's what those treks look like. In Nepal, we use porters. In Bhutan, we use animals, kind of like we do in Peru mostly as well too. But we use horses, and those horses are going to move our gear from point A to point B. We'll have horsemen, we'll have guys, we usually have some helpers, but the horses move, and we get to various points, and then we set up camp in areas that usually have a mountain or some view or some strategic piece about it. But this is what a typical camp looks like, and this is what a camp looks like all over the world. But yeah, so that's kind of what to expect. Little bathrooms, little mess tents and things as you make your way up. Now this is the Trans-Bhutan Trail, again, that starts in Ha and runs all the way across the country. One of the things that we like to do in this is to take a little, 30 or 40 mile section with a pass valley, kind of doing some village to village trekking, seeing what life is like in Bhutan. Up in the mountains, there are not a lot of people. In the valley and crossing, there are more people to kind of see. So a little bit different in Nepal. Usually in Nepal, high up in the mountains, you have a lot more people. Here in Bhutan, you do not have as many people up there as well. So some of this Trans Bhutan Trail is really, really fun. One thing I would like to point out, and I love this, this is Sakteng Wildlife Sanctuary. This is in the far east of Bhutan. Nobody goes into the far east of Bhutan, but what's really, really, really cool about it is they are the only country in the world that sets aside a wildlife sanctuary for Yetis, Bigfoot. They recognize the existence of Bigfoot in this remote part of the world, and there is um, countryside set aside to go into big, or there's for Bigfoot to live happily. So it's kind of cool. I tried to do a Bigfoot trek a long time ago. I couldn't get people to join. But if you're interested in Bigfoot trek someday, make sure to reach out to me because I'd love to do it. So here's what a typical itinerary looks like, and I just want to point some things out. You arrive at Paro, where I showed you earlier. You drive to the capital city, the tour the kind of the main city. You go to Punakha, kind of like the Washington D.C. of Bhutan, and then you kind of start a trek, and those treks usually are 5, 6, 7 days. And then on the way back, you drive back to Paro, you go to the Tiger's Nest, and you depart. That's a typical 11 days. You can do it for shorter, but if you want to do any of the bigger treks, then you're going to need about 10 or 11 days. And if you look at some of the elevation gains here, you can see it's a much lower elevation itself. These are 6 to 9,000, maybe 11,000 feet. This is clearly a huge day, 4,600 feet. But as you can see, 12 to 9 miles. But elevation is not super high like it is on other treks in this area. So as I mentioned, the other destinations, Paro is a historical sites, the Tiger's Nest. This is the Bhutan's most spiritual place and a major pilgrimage spot. Is 2,500 feet hike. Have to do it. Thimphu, capital city, and Punakha. Let's look at it. This is Thimphu. Really, really cool city. I think this is the only major city in the world that doesn't have a stoplight. So it's the biggest city. I want to say 800,000 people. It doesn't look like that to me here, but that's what the numbers tell me. And it's a fun, safe place to wander around in. I actually did karaoke in Thimphu here one time. It was quite fun. Right up on the hill is the Golden Buddha. It looks over. This was a couple that came on one of our trips recently. And then Punakha, a short drive away. Again, just beautiful valleys, and this is kind of the administrative capital of a certain set of regions. So definitely worth part of your trek, whether that's at the end or the beginning. Um, the One of the suspension bridges, I love suspension bridges more than anything, like I said earlier. And this right here is a really, real cool suspension bridge traveling in the area that we just saw. So the other cool thing about festivals and Bhutan is um, the treks in Bhutan is there's a lot of festivals that take place. So you can a lot of times time your trek with various festivals in the spring or the autumn and make sure you get out and see this traditional dancing and traditional people that come from the village and stuff to get to experience this kind of cool thing. And there's lots of festivals that have this. All right, the Tiger's Nest. It's part of every tour. The hike is 7,200 feet to 10,240 feet. It's 4 miles. This is the most famous monastery in Bhutan. This is that one I showed you at the beginning. Guru Rinpoche flew to the site on the back of a flying tiger in the 7th century. And when you get to the Tiger's Nest, you can see where I think it was his hand or his foot inside it. But if you look right here, this is near the start of the trek, and you can see right up here, it's this monastery built attached to a cave up on a cliff. And you spend the day kind of going up and getting to this point. You can see back down to that valley that we flew into. And this is the tiger's nest. And this is the trek that's really everybody kind of wants to see and get close to. And it's absolutely beautiful. You get to go inside, see the cave. I'd recommend going really, really early and getting up there. Again, you can probably get up there in a relatively shorter period of time. It's 4 miles round trip, so two up, a little bit steep, and maybe hit lunch on the way back down. But I absolutely love this place, and I love the valley that it kind of looks down into, and you get to go inside. Unfortunately, you cannot take pictures inside of here, so this is what you get to live with. And this is me, as you'll notice in this picture. I had no gray hair in that picture, and I've all gray hair in this picture right now, but this is me with a local man up there looking down at the tiger's nest. I love this picture from a long time ago. All right, so Bhutan versus Nepal. We have a lot of people who go to Nepal and they want to come back and do Bhutan. Most people want to return. So Bhutan is obviously the quieter, more green, less fitted, less busy, but more expensive place to visit. Nepal has more big mountain treks, whereas Bhutan is kind of a combo, and you don't get as high into the mountains as you do in Nepal. And as I mentioned, Bhutan, you're going to camp. In Nepal, you're mostly going to stay inside in tea houses. And Bhutan is mostly Buddhist, whereas the Khumbu region of Nepal is Buddhist, but a lot of Nepal is Hindu. So here's the top things with treks in Bhutan. Everything's really important to know. Number one, it can be expensive, very expensive on some of these trips. Chomolhari is the busiest trek. If you're going to do one, it's still a great trek for many reasons, but it is the busiest trek. Tiger's Nest has many day trippers, so if you go there early if you can. You can do portions of the Trans-Bhutan Trail. You don't have to do the 250 miles. You'll still need to acclimatize properly on these treks if you get up into the Chomolhari Trek and make sure your body's adjusting to being at 13 or 14,000 feet. You cannot trek solo. You cannot show up here and go on a trek or hike on your own. Everything has to be organized with the government in advance. You can rent gear. To truly understand Bhutan, though, you need to experience the culture, and the culture of some of those areas that I mentioned earlier. Just wandering around in the town or the city or the villages and something, kind of get to see what life is like in Bhutan. The more you go east, the more you get away from tourism. So that's where the Yetis are. That's that national park that's set aside for Yeti habitat. So that's very, very cool. And traveling in trails on cars, although the distances are short, it takes a considerable amount of time. So take these all into consideration if you ever plan an adventure there. Okay, average time, average cost, 7 days of hiking mixed with 4 days of culture, as I mentioned, 10, 11 days. Average costs ranging $4,000 to $7,000 per person minus the airfare. Depends on different variables, type of accommodations you're looking for. Obviously, not on the trek, the accommodations are just that, but kind of before and after, there's some really high-end stuff in Bhutan that can push that. There's some moderate stuff as well, but again, remember you're gonna have that daily fee as well. That's included, that goes to the government there. How can you do Bhutan affordably? Most people will do a trek in Nepal and take a flight to Bhutan with maybe 3 or 4 days of local tours. Still do the Tiger's Nest, but not do any hiking. So that's kind of one methodology kind of behind it. All right, that's it for me tonight. It was a very high level overview. If you'd ever like to have a conversation or look at something in Bhutan, feel free to reach out to me. My name is Donovan, and I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you, and have a good evening.